Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Game Dev London podcast, a community of game developers and game enthusiasts talking about the one thing they all enjoy the most, games. My name is Nichola Humphreys. You can refer to me as she, her, and I will be your host on the Game Dev London podcast for today. And today we are joined by a special guest and dear friend of mine, Jack Roper. Roper, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, yes. My name is Jack Roper. I'm a game developer at PlayEmber. I've been there I am so close to 2 years now. I'm like a month away for being 2 years. But yeah, worked on most, if not, probably most of the titles. And yeah, had on the games I've worked on, had a total of 20 million downloads. So it's going pretty well.
Very nice. Before we get into the topic of conversation today, which is hyper-casual space in video games, well, I'll shoot a question your way just so then the audience can get to know you a little bit more. So my icebreaker question for you today is: if you had to be part of any video game universe, what would it be and why?
I think I would be part of the Animal Crossing universe. It's just the most chill and zen, and I don't know, you get to wake up every day and see this amazing new animal character. And I want to go and collect everything in the world. And that's just the life I want. I don't want to worry about, adult things, even though they still exist in that game. But at least my way of, doing those things is collecting fish and finding T-Rex skeletons.
Nice. Yeah. And as well, you can just access the museums whenever you want. It's like, I think I'm going to go to the museum again today.
I heard the coffee is amazing and it's made by a pigeon. So,
well, that's a great answer, and I'm all down for living in chill atmospheres. So, moving on to the topic of conversation today, like I said before, is hyper-casual space in video games. Tongue twister if you say it too fast. So hyper-casual is normally defined as extremely engaging, instantly playable, and lightweight in their mechanics. So I'm curious, what would you define it in your own personal way?
Yeah, so that sums it up quite well. I'd kind of describe it as like quick, snackable, fun experiences that you can pick up the game, you look at it, you see, even if you just see a video of it, you know exactly what the gameplay is, and you can go into that game expecting everything you've seen already, and it just works when you play it the way you expect it to work. But nice, short, snackable experiences.
Nice. And like one of the main characteristics of hyper-casual games is that they are most often free to play. And you say that you've worked on multiple hyper-casual games. I'm curious, do you feel that most of them tend to be free to play or very accessible to people who maybe aren't willing to purchase things on the App Store?
Yeah, the ones we make are often free to play, but that does include ads, and ads are not for everyone as well. So there's that fine line of trying to not put in too many ads that we're losing players. But yeah, having enough ads that we are still making a profit, and so we can still continue making games as well. But that's it's not to say that we haven't. We've got a game called Raft Life, and we've tried that on the Switch store as well, but as a paid experience, and that did really well as a paid game as well. So I don't think they have to be free to play, but I think for the target audience there, I don't think we'd want to charge people for these shorter snackable experiences. But yeah.
Nice. Well, do you find that then in that case, having mobile games that are hyper casual, having them be free on the App Store draws in more audiences?
Yeah. So especially, because it's an app, we do an app-based setup. So we want to make the game as appealing as possible. And we don't. Yeah, and you're not going to want to pay for a game and then get an ad as well. So I think it's for hyper casual because there tend to be shorter experiences, and have shorter retention times than casual game. Yeah, free to play is definitely the way to go.
Nice. And yeah, there's so many hyper casual games out there that people may not have considered that are hyper casual. Some of the more popular examples being like Crossy Roads, Hole.io, Temple Run, and Pac-Man. So I'm curious, is there any examples that you have that people may have picked up and played without even knowing that they were hyper casual games?
I'm not too sure. I think I like to think Unpacking is quite a hyper casual game. It's just without all the ads and stuff in it. That is a paid experience. But yeah, it's hard to define in a sense. It depends, kind of how it's approached. But yeah, I think Unpacking, the core of it is a hyper casual game, and it has this like overarching like meta to it, which makes it into the more casual game it is, with like the storybook, and you're seeing the story unfold as you play the game. So yeah, I think games like that, and I mean, there's the I say are obvious ones, but like I work in the space, so it's obvious to me. But like all the Voodoo Ketchup games, Quali. I don't think they do as much hyper casual anymore. I think they've gone into PC now, but yeah, those kind of they're the big names. Lion Studios as well. Yeah, they're all hyper casual.
Nice. And you mentioned there that there was sometimes game developers go more into casual. So what would you say is the difference between hyper casual spaces versus casual spaces in mobile games?
So I think hyper casual is more you have this one goal, and this one mechanic. Like a game is usually built about, the way we go about it is we have the one mechanic, build out around that one mechanic, and keep it fully in on that one mechanic. Which is great because that's kind of what we were taught in uni, right? So it was a really nice transition into that. But yeah. And then with casual, that's where you'd have your core mechanic, and then you might add in more other mechanics and build things up and up and up and up and up.
Mm-hmm.
It starts to become a bigger experience, and there's more than this one goal. Then you might have other like branching off goals.
Nice. And yeah, you mentioned mechanics there. So off the top of your head, what mechanics do you say define the hyper casual genre?
I think it can be any mechanic. Like that's the great thing about this space, and the thing I love about it is that you can any mechanic can be made into a hyper casual game. And we have tried some crazy things as well. but yeah, it's good fun. But yeah, I don't think you can really define it to one, but we tend to stick to more like one button games. So, a lot of people play those games on their way to their daily commute. So they don't want to, it's just, you'll have a coffee in one hand and just playing the game on the other. So kind of want that kind of setup where possible.
Nice. And yeah, because like for example, you can see games like Flappy Bird when all you have to do is just tap the screen and then you either go up or you don't. That's, I feel like that sort of stuff is super easy on the go, and it really allows people to still play games while doing mundane tasks like grabbing coffee or walking to the shops or walking the dog, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
And you mentioned that hyper casual games are very popular on like phones and stuff. So why else do you think hyper casual games are so popular?
I think it's more because everyone has a phone. Not everyone will have a console. And it's it's these games that fill in the gaps in the day. Like when you're traveling or somewhere on your daily commute, or you're just bored, and you can quickly fill in that gap with this quick, satisfying experience that's gonna give you satisfaction straight away. So I think that's like the catch of it.
Nice. And with there being almost like very simple mechanics in it, what kind of visual aesthetic do you feel suits the hyper casual mobile game space?
So it tends to go like super like clean kind of like super contrasted between like, so the player is like the main, or whatever the action the player is doing is like the front and center on the screen, and then you need like the good contrast between the player and the obstacles, so it's super clear what the gameplay is from the get-go. But that's the kind of visual style we'll go for, like toony kind of outlines. Depends on the game, really. Sometimes we go super realistic as well, if we're trying to mimic a real life thing. But it depends. It depends on the context and where this game idea has come from. Should it be like a super realistic or super toony game?
Nice. And you mentioned there as well that you tend to focus more on like showing the core mechanics of the player. So I was curious, do you find that characters themselves, or like mascots or characters, have a space in the hyper-casual genre? Because it would be difficult, I find, to put, for example, Kratos, who has thousands, if not millions of polygons, and putting him in like a Hyperbird type game.
So we usually use like it's like a hyper-casual model, if that makes sense. It's like quite a defined thing in our dev space, and so that's just like a plain, like kind of, I don't know, I can't really describe it, but almost clay like humanoid. But then we add on like, oh, now you've got this base character, let's add on hats, clothes, shoes. But trying to keep it super low poly. So it's app size is nice and small.
So I guess that way you're almost allowing the player to insert themselves into the game. So it's not too much focused on the character itself, but still focusing on the player and the mechanic that the player is experiencing.
Yeah, of course. And even in like, we did a game called Cargo Truck Parking, and even then we have like hats and stuff you can swap out. So
nice. It reminds me of the hats that you collect in Overcooked. I believe you can collect hats in Overcooked.
Yes,
yes. I might be getting.
It's been a while since I played it, so I'm not too sure.
Or at least you can unlock different characters that you can.
As you play. Yeah.
I feel like I've said the wrong game, but I know exactly what kind of game I'm thinking of. It will hit me at like 3 a.m. in the morning. But going back to the hyper-casual games, you mentioned that you've made quite a few games from your company. So I'm curious, what kind of hyper-casual mobile games do you take inspiration from?
It's not always from other games. So there are other games, and we take. There's been a lot of great games out there. There's one called Farmland by Homer Games. That's like a super polished, nice, satisfying experience. It's more idle arcade than hyper casual, but they're kind of like intertwining at the moment in this space. And then Chat, Voodoo, Lion Studios, all the main publishers. There's a lot of inspiration we can take from there. And also just general games as well. Like with Cargo Parking, I play a lot of Euro Truck Simulator. And so when we started on that game, I was like all over it. But there's a lot of places inspiration from it. It can come from anywhere. TikTok videos are a big one. But I
guess with having a platform where you're accessible to applications such as TikTok as well, you're able to really capture the quick attention span of players as well, to be like, oh, you've watched 5 minutes of TikTok and you're really hankering playing this game, so you should totally just swipe up and then swap to our game.
Exactly.
But away from mobiles, do you feel that there is a space for hyper-casual games on consoles with games such as Jump King, Pogo Stuck, or My Name is Mayo?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Unpacking is a good example of where it can work. And there's another game I've been playing recently, Dorf Romantic. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's really like super simple city builder, but it's just so satisfying. And I don't think they are hyper casual games in that sense, but like they are very close to 2B1. That if you did make one, it would probably do well on the console. And we did one, Raft Life, which is Idle Arcade / Hypercasual. And yeah, like I said, we put that on the Switch, and it did really well as well. So yeah, I think there's definitely a space for it. I just think it's harder to do it consistently on console than it would be on mobile, because when someone picks up a controller, they're entering like, oh, I'm going to be on this for a few hours, whereas on a phone, you're like, oh, a couple of minutes, and then.
No, that makes sense. And like I feel with large scale, almost AAA games that you can put on console, not mobile, that you almost like you said, you're entering a world, and it's so hard to pick up a game for 5 minutes, play the story, and then put it down when thousands of hours have been put into this experience that the player is going to then play. So you couldn't really pick up the new God of War and play it for 5 minutes, or like, for example, with The Last of Us, you can't be like, I think I'm going to walk 10 feet and then close the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do feel like with some big games out there, you can almost see hyper casual games sort of snuck into them. So, for example, you can get like mini games of World of Warcraft, where it's just a case of clicking a button and then you escape that mini game that you're experiencing, and then you go back into the hundreds of mechanic game that you're currently experiencing.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what Hypercasual does on mobile. It kind of, you go into the Play Store, that's kind of like, I don't know, if you think of like PlayStation Home, and then you have all the different areas you can go into. It's kind of, yeah, I like to think of it like that. But
yeah, and like I've noticed that there are some games that you can put on the PlayStation Store or the Xbox Store, which can specifically be used for trophy hunting. So I know that can be quite a hobby within the gaming community. So people enjoy collecting platinum, so then they can show it off to their friends and then show that they're actually a good gamer, if you would. And there are some hyper casual games on the PlayStation Store, which if you complete it for an hour or half an hour, you then get that platinum. So I feel like there are perks of having hyper casual spaces and short games, not necessarily mobile games, but short games on the console stores.
yeah, it's definitely possible. And I think, yeah, like I said, the trophies, that captures that kind of audience as well. So yeah, I think, yeah, there's definitely an audience for it.
And with the PC, it's sort of like a mixture between the exclusivity of having a controller and having the easy accessibility of a mobile as well. So with some mobile games, you can access them on the computer, whereas it's rarer, but you can also get console exclusive games now on the computer.
Yeah.
So you did mention as well beforehand that you put adverts in some of your free-to-play games. So what monetization strategies do you feel work best for hyper-casual mobile games?
So we try and keep it as obvious as possible where an ad's going to happen. Like if you click a collect button, then you can know to like, oh, probably going to get an ad here. So it's not like unfair for the user. It's like, it's just going to interrupt gameplay. And then we do ads for like rewarded ads. So if you're struggling in some parts of the game, then you can watch a slightly longer ad and get the reward you need to do better in that game or progress quicker in that game.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those are pretty much the main ones. They work quite well. But yeah, it's more just what's least annoying, basically, is the best strategy.
No, that makes sense. Like with some casual games that I try to look for on the app, so I usually go to some of the reviews to just double check, and if there are reviews saying there are too many adverts, I feel like it can almost put me off installing that game, knowing that my immersion within this space will then get broken by someone advertising TikTok to me with some random TikTok to be like, oh, you too can win $1,000 if you recreate this TikTok. And it's like, okay, I just want to watch the Flappy Bird go up and down.
Yeah, it's quite the ads are sometimes like 0 to 10 out of, not ads, the reviews are sometimes like 0 to 10, and like on some of our games we'll get like some reviews that are like way too many ads, and then other reviews are like, "This is the best game ever. I'm never stopping playing this game." So it's just it's hard to find that balance, but yeah, we get analytics, and through those analytics, we can kind of see what is working.
And do you feel like there is a way in which you can test that balance between giving the player an advert or not giving them an advert?
Yeah, so we do something called A/B testing, where it's like, oh, let's give 20% of people this version of the game and 20% of people this version of the game. But the game itself will have all those versions in, and then we can just toggle it on and off. And then that way we can compare the two results as well and see what works best.
Nice. And like with there being so many mobile games out there, especially on the App Store, it can be difficult to get into. But with so many game engines out there, which are easily accessible for everyone, what game engines do you think favor making hyper-casual games, especially for people who might be trying to get into the hyper-casual space for the first time?
Definitely Unity, I think is probably the best one. It just has so much support for that kind of development, and I think they recently bought a couple of ad colonies. I think it was called Ad Colony, maybe. But they ad monetization platforms they recently bought, which was quite controversial in the sense that like people starting to feel like Unity aren't really focused on the developers at the moment. But I don't know. For us, it helped us because we're a mobile games company, so what they're doing is working for us. But I don't know if it's biased or not, and I hope it isn't, obviously. But yeah, and I recently learned about this. It's like a game engine called Canva. I think it was Canva. I'll double check that. But it's a web-based game engine. So it's really good for like Snapchat games, which tend to be quite hyper casual as well, which might lead back into a question you asked earlier, like games that didn't realize were hyper casual. But yeah, Snapchat games. I imagine that's really good for like if you want to go into that area, or just web games. I think is a really good platform for hyper casual as well.
Nice. And yeah, at least with like stuff like Snapchat and TikTok, like you mentioned earlier, it also adds that social aspect as well, where you can then send those games that you've seen on said platforms to your friends, and then that also then increases the overall numbers that then install your game as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the Wordle effect of the daily the daily games, and then sharing your results. That's just it's like the dream to have a game like that.
No, exactly. And like when it becomes so popular to the point where it, I guess, becomes a trend as well, then you have people then copying the influencer that they see or the friend that they see on Twitter, and then you can almost see a wave of people participating in this trend. So like you mentioned with the Wordle, I remember for a while all I would see on my Twitter feed would just the green, just the blocks, and I was like, I don't even know what the word is today. And then you'd also get the people who get it in one, and it's like, you clearly refresh the page. We know, everyone knows this. But yeah, you mentioned Unity earlier, and this is an engine that I bring up regularly on these podcasts to mention that it is such like an easy way to get into making games. So I'm curious whether you think it would be a great way for beginners to get into it, like get into making games, and what are your recommendations for jumping into Unity for the first time?
I think start with something to take. Start with like a very simple like reference point, and just try and recreate that reference point. There's great tutorials on Unity itself. The Unity is so like well used that you can go on YouTube, type in anything, and there's a tutorial for it. I think Unity is a really good starting point. It has lots and lots of developers on it already, and there's so much help out there already that someone's done it already. So Googling and seeing, okay, that's how they've done it. Now, how am I going to do it?
No, that makes sense. Yeah. And that's the program that we even got taught at university as well. And even if you're getting into making games and you're not the greatest coder, which I can admit that I am not the greatest coder, but boy, could I make a good hyper-casual game in the Unity space. So even if you're like not a complex coder who knows every mathematical equation, it's still something where you can pick up and it's still quite user-friendly. And there are channels, thankfully, on YouTube, such as Brackies and GMTK, who almost guide you into making those games for the first time and maybe tell you what you should be looking out for when writing code or in just exploring the engine itself.
Yeah, one big thing was like going into like this programming space was like I never really knew what if there was like one set standard for all studios or if it was different for like studios. Like I didn't really know how to code in a sense that like, oh, how is this going to benefit me in getting a job, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think like now I've been doing it for quite a while now. It's like try and just keep your code kind of modular so you can so it's more like a drag and drop kind of thing, and you can drag and drop it and it'll just kind of work. So try and keep everything in think of everything as jobs. Like, what is this thing's job? Okay, let's make a script for that job, and let's make a script for that job, and then you can kind of dip in and out of those jobs.
Okay, so keeping the organization skills at top priority when making this code.
I think and then if you can do that, then you can keep making. You can quite easily build off from your last project, if that makes sense. So you can just keep building up and up and up, and then you'll just be consistently making games quite quickly. So
no, that makes a lot of sense. Like I remember when I was making some of the projects for our uni course, I would just copy and paste some code to be like, oh, this is how a 3D character would move in this space. So I know this works, and I know exactly what I need to link to this in the Unity engine. So I'm just going to copy and paste this and pretend like I wrote it from scratch.
Yeah, exactly. That's the quick way, efficient way to get it done. So.
And what would be your recommendations for people trying to practice getting into maybe like the hyper casual space, or specifically practicing making games for mobile?
I think when you have the time, and it's hard to have the time if you're not in the space already, and then or if you're doing like if you have a daytime job that's not in the game development industry, and you want to try and get into it, it's the hardest bit is finding the time to do it. But just keeping your ideas super simple, and like Flappy Bird, it's you tap, you move up, or you fall, and then you have some obstacles in the way. Just try and like practice very simple games like that, and try and do it not as quick as possible, but get the flow of it first, then start trying to do it quickly, if that makes sense. Because the hyper-casual space moves really quickly, and we try and get a game finished within 2 weeks. So it's a very quick turnaround, and the prototype can be anything from like 3 days is a good mark for a prototype before we take it further. So just trying to think of a mechanic. Don't think about the UI or anything. Just think of the mechanic, make the mechanic, and then if you like it, then you can build it out.
Nice. And what would you say is a usual flow of concept to final product for making a hyper-casual mobile game? Like, what is the processes that you and your company would go through?
So I'll do like kind of overall what the general kind of a bit more vaguer.
No worries. Don't want to break no NDAs on the podcast.
But the general flow is make a prototype, test it on ads, see how much interest it gets and how much it costs to get people interested as well. And then if that's good, then you'd build it out, put it on the store with a couple of levels and some ads. and then you get a good idea of like, oh, how long are people playing this? How much would it make in a general playthrough? And then you use that to build your kind of like not final, but like your baseline product, and then build up from that as well.
Okay, so it's almost as if you're releasing an alpha out into the open to be like, what do you think of this mechanic? And then that's when you would then expand upon it and add fancy graphics and add some sound, some UI, and then really bring it in, like have it in a whole new world of itself, but still keeping that core mechanic.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. I guess that way with mobile games, it's a lot easier to bring out a few within a year compared to like AAA studios who might take like 4 to maybe 10 years to make one project.
Yeah. We definitely, and we're like growing now as well as a company. So we're definitely getting like a lot more games out now than we were when I first joined. But it's a quite quick turnaround, which is good because if one idea doesn't work, 1 out of 10 will. So
nice.
Best to get as many done and then find that one that doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. And that way as well, it sort of conquers the issue of there being maybe an oversaturated market within the mobile market space. Because if you release one game in there, it would be so difficult to find it. But then if you release 10, there's a larger chance of your project being noticed within the large sea of games in the mobile Play Store.
Especially on the mobile markets, the like even if we put a game out and has this really like niche kind of title that no one else has come up with, you can put it in and you still have to scroll to find it. So it's really hard to get your game seen without any marketing.
And you mentioned marketing there, so I'm curious what way outside of like TikTok and social media platforms would you usually use to advertise your up and coming project or just a single person made project? Like what would you recommend doing outside of a social media platform?
In terms of, I don't know, because social media platform is kind of what we use. But TikTok, you can get a lot of organics without paying to do an ad. You can get a lot of organics on TikTok, and it can go. It's completely unpredictable in the sense that you can post one video and it will get nothing. You can post another video and it will get like a million views. So I think TikTok is really good, and especially if it's like a nice, satisfying mechanic, people are going to latch onto that, and that'll work really well on TikTok. And Twitter as well is always really, really good. Just general kind of almost like devlog updates. But outside of that, I'm not. I don't know really, unfortunately.
No, that makes sense. It's I guess it's a lot harder to advertise an up and coming mobile game compared to, for example, I'm going to use God of War again because it's a great game. But I feel like when they have such large marketing budgets, it's difficult to then one up that, seeing as like it's literally a God of War taking over bus stops and and city skyscrapers, for example.
Yeah.
But with some game jams, for example, I noticed that some categories that you can vote in also include uploading the project for mobile platforms. So would you recommend potentially practicing in game jam environments for seeing whether people enjoy the way you make hyper-casual games, or whether it's just like a great way to get some practice in?
Yeah, absolutely. And that does remind me that a lot of the companies do hyper-casual game jams, and they often pay for the best one, and they will probably hire you as well. There's a lot of competitions I've seen where it's like, oh, the winner gets this and we might hire you, or that kind of thing. But I think itch is a good place for it as well. I think it's also really good for hyper-casual because it's great to test your free to play games, and people won't, if you put your game up there for free as well, people are not going to expect this massive large project. but yeah, and itch has like the donation option as well. So yeah, if people did feel like it's worth paying for, then yeah, you can always get donations.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like itch is a great website where people can explore the wholesome community that is game development. Whereas something like the Play Store or the PlayStation Store, it's open to literally everyone, and it's so
Yeah,
hard to get like some sort of feedback or some noticeable interest when it's either a checkbox of did this person buy it, yes, no. Whereas with itch, it's like, hey, I tried this game for 5 minutes and I like this because of X, Y, and Z reason. Or maybe if you're going to explore this in the future, you might want to change this mechanic a little bit. So there's really that open chance of getting feedback and improving games because you're within that wholesome community.
yeah, and I think it kind of has that more itch, like you enter it already knowing that like, oh, I can talk directly to the person that made this game. So that yeah, it's a lot more social, or it feels a lot more. I don't know what the word is. Social feels like the right word, but it doesn't at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
social and easily
friendly, I
interactive.
guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And yeah, like for itch being such a great way of people getting into games, getting into making hyper casual spaces, what other advice would you give people who are thinking about getting into the hyper casual space who maybe haven't joined the industry just yet, or are looking into getting into the industry and focusing more on like hyper casual environments?
yeah. So if you're looking to get in, I think LinkedIn is also a great place to post your work. And I feel, from what I've seen, it feels like LinkedIn is the most active space for hyper casual companies.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then also the bigger publishers, you can just send your game in, and who knows, maybe they'll accept it, and then yeah, and then at that point it's a case of like, oh, okay, here's our SDK. Usually they'll give you the SDK to put in their kind of analytics and ads, and then yeah, and then it goes off to the store. So I don't think yeah. Yeah, it's hard to get into any part of the game industry, but yeah, hyper casual. There's a lot of external places you can just go into it. I'll try um, and get some feedback as well. But yeah, LinkedIn, follow like the companies that interest you the most. But yeah, follow Play Ember.
Just a quick shout out.
Get that quick shout out. But yeah.
Nice. And do you feel that hyper casual spaces are usually more open to bringing in graduates compared to like AAA or larger companies?
Yeah, I think so. It's because it's more. I mean, I don't know about other unis, but in our uni, we was taught to build games from just one mechanic and just focus on that one mechanic and build out from that one mechanic. So, if you're already in that kind of mindset, then you're already kind of thinking about you're already in the hyper casual mindset, really. So yeah, I think it kind of makes sense that graduates, yeah, are kind of well suited for hyper casual as well as other industries, of course. But yeah, hyper casual is yeah.
Yeah, and that way as well, by getting your foot into the hyper casual space, it allows for you to make multiple projects within that hyper casual mobile
Mm-hmm.
game space. And then when applying for larger roles or different roles, you can then say like, oh, I've got 15 projects under my belt, all with 20 million plus downloads, and that already like gives you such an advantage in going into big places or continuing your adventure in a hyper casual space.
Of course, yeah.
Awesome. And yeah, I guess with hyper casual spaces, it's crazy to think that sometimes people aren't even aware that they have hyper casual games on their phone. Because I know that if you tell someone, "Oh, do you play games?" they usually say like, "Oh no, I'm not really much of a gamer." And then it's like, okay, do you have Candy Crush on your phone or Flappy Bird or H or anything like that. They're like, oh yeah, I've put almost like 100 hours into that, and it's like, aha,
You are a gamer.
Haha, you secretly do play the games.
And then they go, no, I'm not a gamer.
Just ripping any like Unreal logos off their clothes,
Yeah.
like no.
Yeah.
But do you feel like the hyper casual space is a great way for people to almost get into games, whether that be going into more in-depth mobile games or maybe unlocking their potential of then being a true gamer?
Yeah, I think the best thing about it is that you'll learn so much. You'll do because the turnaround is so quick. So every 2 weeks you'll be working on an entirely different new mechanic, which means you get to learn a lot very quickly because it might be like a puzzle game you're making or an idle arcade game you're making or just a general arcade game. So you'll go through all the different kind of genres, even storytelling as well. That's quite big in the hyper casual space as well. So you'll go through like all the different genres. You'll get to experience lots and lots very quickly as well, which means you'll learn lots and lots very quickly. Yeah, I think that's like the biggest takeaway I got from working in this space is just how much I've learned and how much my kind of work has changed from when I started to now. It's crazy to think that like, wow, if I tried to do this like 2 years ago, I didn't think that was possible. But, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy to think how the things that we would practice in our university course had really given us the knowledge that we needed now when we're making either AAA NDA hidden games or or hyper casual games. It's crazy to think that the things that we were learning have had such a big influence on what we have been making now.
Yeah, it is. Very grateful for that in uni as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's always hard to know, like, is this what it's going to be like in the industry? But yeah, it's definitely gave the first step.
No, exactly. So if anyone is super considering or even slightly considering going to university, I would highly recommend it because it will unlock so many doors and so many potentials that you might not have had during university. But not to say that if you don't want to go, I'm not going to force you to go. But it's just if you're thinking about doing it, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, you could definitely get into the industry without uni. It makes it a bit harder, but it's not unheard of. It's not that uncommon, I don't think. But yeah.
And one thing that we forgot to cover, which you did mention earlier, is target audiences. So I'm curious, what would you say is normally the target audience for hyper casual games?
I think it's more kind of everyone. So it could be from the ages of like 13 all the way up to 80, 90. You know, I don't think there's really an age we can put on it. So yeah, I think we just kind of make the game in mind, like, oh, anyone could be playing this. But yeah, and we try and like factor in like, oh, yeah, just make it an enjoyable experience, make it super satisfying. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and I couldn't agree more. And with the mechanics usually being quite focused on a single feature or a simple mechanic, it really opens up any accessibility options that people might have. So you might not need to worry about pressing 6 different buttons on a controller at the same time. And instead, it's just like, no, you just tap the screen and then you jump or you flip or you fall, and that's all you need to do. And then that way, it really opens up the doors for literally everyone playing a hyper casual game, which is an amazing thing to be having for a project, really.
Of course, yeah.
But with that, that is all the questions that I had for today. But if anyone wants to continue the discussion, feel free to comment in the comments below. If you're watching this on YouTube, or if not, you can jump onto the Game Dev London Discord because there's always a discussion in there. So we're super friendly. So come say hello. But that does conclude another episode of the Game Dev London podcast. I've been your host, Nichola, and you can find me at Humphreys Media online on most platforms. And big thank you to Jack for being my guest today. So I'm curious, Jack, if people want to continue this lovely discussion of hypercasual spaces in mobile games, where can they find you? Where can they poke you?
LinkedIn. Probably easiest way to find me is either just search Play Ember and then look at the employees, or just type in Jack Roper. I don't know how many Jack Ropers there are, but I like to think that's quite a unique name. But I don't know. Maybe I'm gonna shock myself when I have a look myself. Or Twitter at Rojax Game Dev. That's ROJAX. But you can pop it on the description as well.
Nice. Yeah, to be fair, it's very difficult to to get a name correct sometimes, and typing in my name, I'm always surprised when there's other versions of me in and around the world. I'm like, who are you people? But yeah, feel free to jump by on the Game Dev London podcast or on the Discord. And yeah, thank you to everyone who's tuned in today, and thank you again, Jack, for being a guest on said podcast. And if you want any more of latest updates at Game Dev London, feel free to check out our website, Discord, like again. Otherwise, we'll see you at the same time next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See ya.